Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today is going to be another one of my individual scouting reports for the draft class of 2022. In today's video, I'm going to be covering Kendall Brown out of Baylor University. So without any further delay, let's get straight into the video. Moving on to some stats regarding Kendall Brown, he is 18 years old, stands at about 6 feet 8 inches, weighs about 205 pounds, and has a 6'11 wingspan. And regarding his stats, this is his first year in college as he is 18. With Baylor, he is averaging 12.8 points, 3.5 rebounds, 1.7 assists, and 1.3 steals per game, shooting 71% from the field, 66% from the free throw line, and 50% from behind the arc. Moving on to the strengths of Kendall Brown as a prospect, first up, we have his positional size and two-way versatility. Standing at that 6'8" height, he's just dominant out there at the collegiate level. He just stands out physically. And even though he is only 205 pounds, the weight doesn't really seem to be an issue, especially when you watch him play. He's able to take advantage of just how big he is. And again, that weight might be a little bit concerning. You might say, oh, but he might be on, the thinner side. That's just not the case, especially when you just watch him play. He just looks more physically dominant, more grown than any other player out on the court, pretty much, especially on the opposite team. Where on that, I think Baylor personally is going to go all the way. I expect them to be at the very least in the Final Four, just given the NBA size that they have. As Kendall Brown is really only their small forward, but I digress. That's a conversation for another day. But also his two-way versatility, in my opinion. Kendall Brown's strengths as a defensive player is what really highlights him as a prospect for me. As you can see, I highlight that he is a defensive playmaker, right? And he just makes plays happen on the defensive side of the floor. Never mind the fact that he can guard practically 1 through 5 at the collegiate level, and I expect him to be able to guard 1 through 4 at the NBA level, right? As I stated before, where the weight might seem like an issue, it's not really an issue when you watch him play. He's much more toned per se than rather like big, and he just looks more grown compared to everybody else on the court. And I expect that to translate to the NBA level, where he's just able to make plays happen. He just has such a high IQ on the defensive side of the floor, right? You see a lot of other players like Jaden Ivey in my last scouting report, where he kind of fell asleep a lot on the defensive side of the floor. That's not Kendall Brown. His head is always on a swivel. He's always in help side if his man doesn't have the ball, no matter where it is. He always knows exactly where he has to be. He gives the defensive side of the floor full effort. And that's really where he makes his bread, is he's amazing at making plays happen on that help side. As I stated, he's able to create steals and blocks. He's able to seemingly come out of nowhere. And granted, you have to keep in mind that he is, again, playing with NBA size, as he's playing with, other 6'8", 6'9", 7-footers on his team. So, that is helping him. But still, how he's able to contribute, in my opinion, he's really that defensive engine for that Baylor team, is really impressive, given the fact that he's only a freshman. And really, I think his defense is what highlights him as a prospect for me. I think that's his greatest attribute, and I think that's what's really going to propel him at the NBA level, is being an all-around defender who's able to make plays happen. And then moving on to more so of the offensive side of the floor, he's great at filling lanes in transition, and that's really what I think is his greatest strength on the offensive side of the ball. His ability to not only fill the lanes in transition, but cut in the half court. We can start off with, his transition game, where he is adequate as a ball handler, but what really stands out again is his ability to fill lanes. He always knows exactly where to run, whether that's in the middle of the court or one of the side lanes, and he's always in a position to make a play, and he always sprints out. And then, granted, again, this is aided. You have to keep in mind that he is playing with the best team in the country, right? So maybe take that for a little bit maybe take that for what it is. But still, his ability to get out and run in the open floor is really impressive. And while he's not necessarily the greatest athlete per se, he's not going to wow you with any athletic plays. He does know how to get up there. And he has made a number of highlight plays this year where he just dunks, just gets up there, and his head is really above the rim, and it doesn't look all that impressive, but when you really go back and watch the footage, you're like, wow, Kendall Brown really just did that. I didn't know he was capable of that. And in terms of cutting in the half court, that's really what I think is his greatest asset in the half court. He just has such a high IQ overall. Just has such a high IQ, and he knows exactly where to cut in the half court. Whether that's off help side, whether that's back screens, whether that's cutting in front of his man, whatever it is, he knows how to get open, and he knows how to get to the basket. In terms of cutting, and I think that's where a majority of his points do come from, in both transition and cutting. And you can say, well, he is being fed these buckets, in the best team in the country. But you also have to keep in mind that the best team in the country is nowhere near even the worst team in the NBA, right? So this part of his skill set is only going to improve and only be highlighted as he goes to an NBA offense, and he's playing with NBA caliber guards. And looking across the NBA, there's only probably a handful of teams that don't necessarily have a starting caliber point guard. So if he were to go to a team, me personally, I would love for him to go to a team like maybe Cleveland, a team where they have an offensive engine at that point guard position where he can just feast off of just cutting. And I could see that really translate to the NBA level in terms of when a point guard or the main ball handler of a team is in a pick and roll situation, and Kendall Brown just kind of cuts off the kind of just backdoors his man. I could see him getting an easy 4 to 6 points just off that alone. And, I think that's really beneficial for an NBA team to have a player with such a high IQ like that. And again, he's only 18 years old. So that part of his game is only continue to grow as he gets more experience playing the game. And he's also a very solid rebounder. Again, the totals aren't necessarily there, but again, you have to keep in mind that he's playing with NBA caliber size. So that's not necessarily his role on the team, but he's going to be a very solid rebounder, at the NBA level. And just given his size, he gets up there, and it's just his role in the team again on the offensive side of the floor is to run the court, get open in transition, and on the defensive side of the floor, it's to really get back and be that anchor, be almost like that safety for this Baylor team. So that's not necessarily his role to be a rebounder, but he is a very solid rebounder as he has the size uh, to get up there and compete for rebounds. And I expect his rebounding totals to improve as he enters the NBA. And he's also a decent catch and shooter. We're going to talk much more about his shot later on, but as I highlight, he's a decent catch and shooter. I don't say he's necessarily good or average. I'd say he's just decent. I do have concerns about his form, which again we will get to in a little bit. But he is solid when he's open. He's good. You can count on him to knock down shots, and he's also very solid at making reads. As I mentioned, he has a very high IQ, and he does a great job of keeping the ball moving in the half court. He's not going to hold on to the ball. If he sees an open man, he's going to hit them, and he does a great job of. He doesn't have necessarily the best handle in the world or anything like that. He knows his limitations as a player, and he does a great job of taking advantage of his strengths. And he does have a very solid IQ and vision. Again, we'll talk more about his handle and the extent to his vision in a bit. But he does a great job of when he gets the ball and he doesn't necessarily have an open shot, or there's not necessarily anybody open. He does a great job of catching and attacking the paint, and he has such good chemistry with the bigs of Bailey, as he always does, as he loves little dump off passes to the bigs, as previously stated, I expect that to only be much more of an asset for him moving forward, at the NBA level, where he's going to be playing with better spacing, where he's going to have more room to attack and open up shots for his big man, where he can feed them with those little dump off passes that he loves so much. But again, based off his strengths, Kendall Brown projects as much more of a role player rather than, a star player per se, which is perfectly fine given, that his strengths contribute to winning much more than your average prospect. Moving on to the concerns of Kendall Brown as a prospect, first up, we have his shot form. In my opinion, this is the most glaring weakness in his game. And while I stated that he's a decent catch and shoot player, he's a good catch and shoot player in the circumstance where he doesn't necessarily have too much pressure on him. As I stated, if he's open, he's going to hit the shot more than likely, right? But if he isn't necessarily wide open, or, there's a man, not too far from him, I have less and less confidence, in his ability to hit down, shots, just because of how necessarily weird his form is. He doesn't necessarily get too much elevation on his form, and he kind of has to wind up instead of just catching and shooting, which is a problem because you look at the best shooters in the world, they don't wind up, right? They just catch and shoot, right? You have to have a quick release in order to be, a good shooter, especially at that NBA level, right? And, that's just not Kendall Brown. As I stated, he winds up, he takes, about a second or two to shoot the ball. And that 1 or 2 seconds that he requires in order to wind up and shoot the ball, right? That's the difference between getting your shot blocked in the NBA or just getting it or having a heavily contested shot, right? So, he's going to have to, quicken up his shot, get some more elevation on his form in order to, become, a good shooter at the NBA level. And I have questions about how quickly this is going to take place, or even if this is going to take place, right? Because there's a world where he doesn't necessarily improve on the shot, and if he doesn't improve on the shot, I see him being, as I stated, a decent shooter who could, hit open shots, right? Decent to maybe even mediocre, right? Because again, I think that form is pretty concerning. But if he's wide open, he's going to hit shots. But depending on Kendall Brown to be a shooter, is going to be is it's a big question for me, right? So again, as I stated, he needs higher extension on his shot, and he needs to quit. He needs to speed up that release, and I think that's the most pressing thing in his game that he's going to have to work on. Coming into his rookie year, as he is more than likely pretty much it's pretty much a guarantee that he is going to be a one and done. And moving on to that he doesn't project as much of a self creator at the next level, and that's not necessarily a knock per se, as you look at his strengths as a prospect. That leads many, or me specifically, to believe that he's going to be a very solid role player, a very solid to very good role player at the NBA level. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that he doesn't project as a self creator, but he is expected to be a top 10 pick, and you want much more of that star upside as a top 10 pick. As teams that are picking top 10 are picking top 10 for a reason, right? But I do think he's going to project to be a very good role player at the next level. And one aside from his shot, it's just the fact that his handle is a bit questionable. As I stated before, he does a good job of attacking, closeouts, or just players in general. And as I stated, he loves to have a little two-man action with his bigs, as he loves to dump the ball off to them, as he loves to attack either baseline or just attack the basket in general. But he's not gonna break anybody down, or create his own shot. And his form is already slow enough to the point where he's probably not gonna get off shots against collegiate level, high level collegiate competition. So that, combined with him not necessarily having a good handle, is a big problem in terms of his self creation, at the next level. And I get that you could say, well, he's just shooting 50%, and that's combined with him only having played 9 games, but that is also part and due to Baylor not necessarily playing anybody necessarily great outside of maybe Oregon or Michigan State or Villanova. And even in the Villanova game, he was limited due to foul trouble. And against Michigan State and Oregon, he more so dominated, again, as I stated, which is his best strength, his cutting in transition, and his ability to fill the lanes and cut, especially in the half court as well. So again, his shot creation doesn't project to be a shot creator at the next level, which isn't necessarily a struggle. It's not necessarily a bad thing per se when you look at his archetype. But if he's not going to be much of a creator, that combined with his questionable shot form and how long he takes to shoot, right? It's a cause for concern if he's not able to speed up his shot and fix the mechanics of his form a bit. And my last concern is that he might struggle to adjust the speed of the NBA, as even though he is a defensive playmaker, he has had moments where he's been a step behind plays, or he's gotten beat by smaller D3 guards, which isn't necessarily all that much of a concern, just because of how dominant he's been on the defensive end, but it's something to monitor going into the NBA. As the best team that Baylor has played this year has been Villanova. Outside of that, they've played two other really high level mid D1 teams, given the current makeup of the other teams in Michigan State and Oregon. But the rest of that has really been bottom D1 to even D3 level competition, really. And he's struggled in plays here and there, but really, again, the only high level D1 team that Baylor has played this year has been Villanova, and he was essentially played off the court just due to foul trouble. And again, I believe a couple of those fouls were just bad screens set by him, but a couple of those where he got beat, and I thought Villanova did a great job of getting him into foul trouble. And I could see him struggling a bit in the beginning stages of his NBA career with the speed, and I could see him getting into a bit of foul trouble the same way he did against Villanova. But again, I think we need to see more film of him competing against those other top 10 teams like an Alabama or UCLA, one of those teams, before we can adequately judge him adapting speed wise at the next level, which I have it as a concern, but I'm not necessarily outright stating that it's something I'm worried about. It's just really more so something to monitor. And again, Kendall Brown is not going to be a star at the NBA level, right? He's not going to be, a franchise player. He's going to be a good to great role player. That's what he projects out to be. I expect him to be a top 10 pick, more so at the bottom of that 10. I, at the bottom of that top 10, excuse me, I expect him to be, the ninth, 10th pick in the draft. And, his swing skill is really going to be his shot form. I believe in him as a defender, as a player who's going to be able to guard multiple positions and make things happen. He's going to be able to fill lanes both in transition and in the half court. He's going to be able to cut and get himself open and, be an asset to his offensive, to whoever the offensive engine is of the team that he ends up on, right? And I expect him to not only benefit from being at the NBA level, right? Being that there's more space for him to operate with, but I also, again, expect him to help out his offensive creator for whichever team he ends up on, just because of how high of an IQ he has. He's going to keep the ball moving. He's going to get himself open by cutting at the right times, and he's going to be able to have a 1-2 man action with his big man. And he's just a smart player, high IQ. But again, that shot form desperately needs to improve, right? He's going to have to speed up the mechanics of his shot, and he's going to have to get more elevation on his form in order for him to achieve his potential as being a great role player. And that's the end of the video, guys. Again, Kendall Brown supposed to be a top 10 pick in this upcoming draft. I haven't necessarily gone through all my players enough to give my personal opinion on where I think he should be drafted or where he ranks compared to the other top prospects in this class. But he projects as a very good role player, right? Has a lot of different winning attributes in his skill set. His cutting, his ability to keep the ball moving, and his defensive prowess is what really elevates him as a prospect compared with his positional size and versatility. And then the questionable mechanics and the lag time and how long it takes him to wind up and shoot, in his shot. Is a strong negative and is a major concern for me moving forward in terms of determining how good of a role player he is going to be at the NBA level, considering that he doesn't have much of a handle and doesn't project as much of a self creator. And again, he's going to be a good role player, and his shot is going to determine how good of a role player he's going to be at the NBA level. And again, that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and please take care. Please stay safe. COVID going crazy again lately. So everybody, please stay safe and have a blessed day. Take care.